Well, hey, friends, welcome to the Everyday Mulemanship Podcast. Today I am hanging out with my friends Brandon and Noelle. Thanks for doing this, you guys. Glad you got your Zoom figured out.
Yeah, thanks, Ty. We're excited to be here.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys doing this. I know you're both busy and you got a lot going. Sky just ran out the door and I told her, hey, I'm gonna go do a podcast. So whenever you get home, be quiet. And she's like, oh, who you talking to today? And I said, oh, Brandon and Noelle. She's like, oh, what the heck? She loves you guys. She's a big fan. She said, those are just the best people ever. So that's a good compliment
Aw.
coming from Sky.
I always love seeing y'all at Leatherwood. That's about the only time I get to see you guys, but
Yeah.
in
Yeah,
North Carolina.
good old Leatherwood. So you gonna be going back this year?
That's
I
the
guess.
plan as of now.
Sweet. Yeah, I can't
So,
can't miss Leatherwood. That's a great event. That's so good. I always tell my people, all my friends on the East Coast, when they ask about mule events and stuff, I'm like, oh, you got to go to Leatherwood. That is a highlight. So
Yeah.
it's always fun to see you there. So, anyways, you guys got a lot going in life. I was Facebook stalking you when I sent you the message the other day. I guess last week or whatever. Um, I saw a couple posts and I was like, oh, I need to talk to these guys. And in fact, a few people have told me they said you need to get Brandon and Noelle on. I just had Candace Schiager on the
Yeah.
podcast. We recorded it a couple weeks ago, I guess, but it came out yesterday. But she highly recommended you guys. She's like, "Oh, you got to talk to these guys." So I think she likes what you're doing with the donkeys, Brandon, and of course, Noelle and Jewel are always showing off everywhere.
yeah,
So
we've been showing a lot this year. It's about more this year than we've done the last several years combined. So he's
is
been going
that
all over the place.
is that kind of your is that your main recreation is showing? Is that what you like to do the most?
No, I don't really like showing that much, actually. I just,
That's a fib. I'm calling it.
I like the challenge and I get too competitive sometimes. So
Yeah.
I like to try to stay away, but I had a goal this year with Jewel, so I wanted to see if I could reach that with the Western Dressage Association of America. So
Yeah,
yeah,
you ended up doing pretty dang good, didn't you? I remember you posting something about it. I can't remember when you did a while ago.
yeah. So we ended up getting through our bronze medal with their lifetime appointments achievement award thing program that they have. So yeah, we got up through the bronze, which is pretty decent.
Heck
um,
yeah.
and we did some first level stuff this year. So, well, we started in intro and basic at the beginning of the year and then moved up to first level with the Western dressage.
Yeah, so Noelle also went to the World Show and showed there and did well. So
Yeah,
Heck yeah.
been a lot
You
of
know,
fun taking a mule everywhere.
oh yeah. So where are you kind of based out of showing like is it mostly there in North Carolina or do you go all over the place?
you wanna
We do a lot of shows that are like within like 3 hours. So whether that's North Carolina or Virginia, there's actually a decent amount of like Western dressage shows within 3 hours from us. And then we do the one in Oklahoma, the World Show. And then I don't think we have too much else that's far away.
So Oklahoma, that's your farthest away show. That's when you're really getting after it, huh?
Yeah, that's the big one in October. And then after that, Brandon's pretty much done showing. Um,
Right on.
and I still had a few more shows I did this fall, but he was pretty much done after that.
So besides showing, what are you into? Do you like trail ride or what do you do?
Yeah, we do most of our trail riding over the winter. Brandon has we train horses, so we have them. We do a little bit of everything with them, but we mostly focus on like the Western dressage and the trail riding. But we do we start a few colts, and that's always fun. the more mule colts I start, the more I appreciate the horses.
Oh yeah.
So yeah,
They making you earn your money.
yeah. So, but yeah, we trail ride mostly over the winter when we're not showing, not too busy showing.
Nice. So you and is training what you and Brandon mostly do for a living, or do you? I know Brandon does farrier work too. Do you do anything else, or just train full time?
Train and give lessons, and that's what we've transitioned to over the last few years, is both just full time with horses and
Heck yeah.
mules. It's great.
Oh yeah, yeah. When you can make a living out of the saddle, that's pretty awesome, isn't it?
Yeah,
That was
yeah, I
always
get to
my
do what I
dream
love
going.
every day.
Oh yeah, that was my dream growing up. I remember being in school. Like when you're in third grade, and the teacher asks you what you want to do when you grow up. And I remember we had to do this assignment and present to the class, and I said I wanted to be a mule trainer. And the teacher, first they said, "Hold on, what's a mule?" And second, what are you going to teach it to do?
Dear.
And anyways, I was disappointed in the teacher. The teacher lost my respect, you know. But it's pretty cool to make a living from a saddle, isn't it?
Yeah,
It is. I never thought we would be doing that.
So how many years you been doing the training full time now?
Uh, for me, it's been like 4.5 years. And how long for you?
well, I got paid for my first horse and mule when I was 15, so I've never really not been training since then. I've always had something that I either part or full time train since I was 15. So
But you haven't been like you've
I
always been
started full time what, in 22, I think. So 2.5
Nice.
years now.
Where'd you guys
Yeah.
grow up? Did you both grow up in North Carolina?
Yeah, Brandon's been in Ashboro his whole life, and I was born in Greensboro, just what, 30 minutes north, and then moved here when we got married. So
Nice.
we love it.
I just booked my plane tickets for Greensboro when I fly into Leatherwood. So
Yeah.
I like that airport. Nice, quiet airport compared to Charlotte.
It
So
is.
It's way better.
well, heck yeah. So your folks ride mules and horses and train, or how did all this come about for you two? I really don't know a whole lot about you guys' past. I mean, I guess
Yeah.
I pretty much just say hi to y'all at Leatherwood, and that's kind of it. So I don't know a lot about your past and stuff. Tell me
Yeah,
about it.
sure. Yeah, so neither one of us came from equestrian families, but both of us just kind of had a passion for it. And, through different avenues, I think for me, once I got to riding horses, like that's all I wanted to do every day. And then eventually had some opportunities with mules, and then eventually donkeys. And so ever, since the start, it's been a daily thing that's just been part of our lives, probably the biggest part of our lives. And then, um, it's just slightly different. I came from, well, there was a lesson barn down the road from where I lived, and I took, lessons once a week there for a couple of months. And I remember telling my dad, I'm like, I don't want to do this once a week. I want to do this every day. And so I found a neighbor who had horses, and it was a really big blessing because he had really good trained horses, and he did a lot of team pinning and cattle work, stuff like that. And so I got to ride really nice cow horses with him. And then, as we grew older and we had to pay for our own horses or make our own horses, I guess, and mules, we didn't have cows. So we kind of ended up where we are now, but that was kind of where I started.
Yeah, and my parents weren't horse people, and we I I always loved animals. I just always loved dogs and horses and everything, but I when I was 12 or something, I guess I went to a horse camp, and I was hooked from then on, and had a bunch of people help me out because my parents never would have paid as much money as horses cost. So had a bunch of people helping me out over the years and just kept learning more and there was a guy who had horses and mules, and he had several of each, and there was one mule in particular that I just loved, and he ended up giving her to me for Christmas for my 15th, Christmas birthday. And so that was the start of it for me with the mules, especially.
Wait, are you one of those people that have a birthday on Christmas? Is that what you
Near
just said?
Christmas.
Okay,
Yeah.
Christmas. Well, that's
Close
still
enough that people can
yeah.
find the present.
That's the worst. Sorry, you just drew the short end of the stick, but that's the way it is.
Mhm.
Mine's in May, so it's nicely spread out. So, it's interesting, like with the horse world, equine world, mules, donkeys, horses, whatever. There's very few things in life that if you really enjoy it, you can actually go make a living at it. Like think of how many people like to play basketball. Okay. Well, the reality is you're not going to be able to make a living at it, right? Like, like face the facts, kid. You're probably not going to make it. Keep working at it, but it's like golf or any other sport. I love fly fishing, but I'm not going to go make a living fly fishing, right?
Yeah.
But riding horses, mules, donkeys, that's one of those cool things that you can kind of do it, you kind of have to accept the fact of your financial status for life is going to be unique, right? But you can kind of get going at it. I love it. What's it like waking up every day and you guys are running your own show?
Yeah, well, for me, like I said, I never expected to be doing this. Growing up, I remember everybody just said you can't make a living at it and you're not going to have any money. And so that didn't sound great, right? I thought, okay, well, it'll be a hobby. And from the moment I remember, I wanted to be a teacher. If anybody ever asked me what I wanted to do, I wanted to teach. And similarly, everybody said you wouldn't make any money as a teacher, so I just didn't know what I was going to do, right? And I went to college for business because once you don't know what you're going to do, that was the idea, I guess, the only other option. And at the same time, I was working for a battery company, manufacturing batteries, and and then one day, I honestly just felt like uh, God had told me that I was done there. I'd been there like 7 years, and I woke up and I told Noelle that I felt like I was supposed to quit my job, and I really didn't know what else I was going to do. And I will say, if she had told me that, I would have said, "Well, you heard wrong. You got it wrong." But she was great, and she said, "Well, walk in and quit." And we had a really good friend named Janet Holland that uh, has helped us through the way. She had gotten caught in uh, the the hamster wheel of life and the workforce, and said, you can go into business for yourself, and you can figure this out, and God will help you through it. And so you just step out and figure it out. And so it's been amazing. At the time, I thought, well, okay, I'll quit my job and we'll just live off of Noelle's income, and I won't make any money, and we'll just get by. And then it wasn't a couple of years later, and I was just begging Noelle. I said, we're either going to have to hire somebody to help me. What we're doing is not sustainable, or you've got to quit your job or something. And I remember that was even scary at the time when Noelle finally joined me full time, because she had a lot of back pain at the time. And I remember thinking, well, this is hard. This is hard work. You can't, your back can't hurt, and you do this every day. But sitting over a desk tense all day, didn't help either. So she has a lot less back pain actually now, up moving around and riding every day.
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
that's one of the best remedies for a sore back is go for a
Yeah.
ride. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Get you loosened up. Heck yeah.
Yeah.
That is I remember that feeling, Brandon, that you're talking about, quitting jobs. Um not for myself, but for Sky, because I've really never had much for real jobs. I've kind of just skated through life so far. Uh, had a couple odd jobs here and there, but nothing like a career, you know. But Sky, she worked for a long time, uh, full time, and I remember when the day when we talked about it. Of course, she was pregnant with Ellie, our oldest daughter, and she wanted to be a stay-at-home mom and then help me out, and it is a little stressful, kind of going into the unknown, but like do your part, get after it, work hard. And you two you guys got a great work ethic. I follow you along, and either you make your Facebook look really good, like most of us do, or
Yeah.
or you're just dang hard workers. And if it's the latter, if you're a dang hard worker, you can get anything done and you can make it happen. And like a lot of people in this business, it is hard to make a living, when you're comparing yourself to, the wealthy entrepreneur, that's just raking in the millions. But, when you're just trying to make a good living and provide for your family, pay for your house and put food on the table, you can do it. You can do it. You really can. I think it's when we kind of get a little bit greedy that's when things start getting in our way a little bit. Don't you think?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. We kind of went on a journey of becoming minimalist and simplifying everything in our lives, and that made a big change for us. Just I guess within our bills, but just within our day-to-day lives. Like we live in a very tiny um, space now. It's way easier to clean than when we had a big house, and so that was part of it for me. Was like I always felt like I didn't have time to do what I really wanted to do with the equines, and now we can. No, we shaped our lives that we get to do what we want to do and make a living at it.
Heck yeah. Have you guys ever, speaking of minimalists, do you ever listen to the Minimalist podcast, or have you read the book about the minimalists? What I'm talking
I've
about? A couple
read
guys.
I've read a couple books, but probably not the one you're talking about. I've not heard of that podcast.
Anyways, yeah, these couple of guys that, I mean, they're pretty extreme. Like, and I'm not a minimalist. You know, Sky is the minimalist in the relationship. Like if I allowed her to touch my stuff, she would just get rid of so many things. I
Yeah.
I get a lot of gifts from people all over the country, at these clinics, and I have this. I'm here in my office. I got like pictures and stuff and gifts all over the place here from things that people give me that I've collected over the last. I've been doing clinics for like 13 years now, and so I got all kinds of stuff. I'm not gonna let Sky come in here, because she would tear it up.
Yeah.
Her thing is like, well, if I haven't used it in like 2 months, I don't need it. And she just gets rid of it. I have some of the same shirts. Like I mean, it might sound bad. I have some of the same shirts seriously since like high school. And high school is a long time ago, 20 years ago now. And she's like, get rid of this. I'm like, no, I like that shirt.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
Not too holy, right?
same thing with my tack. I keep collecting tack. I just keep on piling it up. Why not?
Right. No, I'd probably get along with Scott at this point. So I can get rid of stuff, and even with the tack, like I just got down to the what I felt like was the bare minimum of what we needed, and even like I remember, I had like buckets and buckets of bits, but I only had a few that I used,
Hmm.
on a day-to-day basis. And so now I'm very minimalistic with everything.
Yeah, we've gotten down to the bare minimum of tack like 10 times and somehow still have more tack that we don't use.
Yeah.
So like we keep
Yeah.
finding stuff and it's like, oh, I guess we can get rid of that too.
Hmm.
But
Well, see, like most people in their tack rooms, though, they'll have like 50 bits of all kinds of gimmicks and gadgets. Now, see,
Yeah.
I got a pile of bits, but like 20 of them are snaffle bits, and they're the same. The same. It's the same type of bit. I
yeah.
just got them on different hangers. So I don't have a whole bunch of like gadgets. It's like and like bridle bits. I got a bunch of half breeds and a couple of spades and that kind of stuff. But some people can pile up the gadgets, and that's where I cross. I'm not gonna have a pile of gadgets.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have started to try to collect a few gadgets lately, though. I got one of my master class students gave me a mule skull. Um, their daughter's mule passed away last year, and his name we call him Phineas Bones. Okay, it's his skull, and I've been doing these bit demonstrations, and so a lot of these dumb gadgets that people use, these things, I've started to try to get a hold of them and show like what it's doing on the skull,
Mm.
and
Cool.
using that skull, it gives a whole different perspective. So now I'm trying to find all those gadgets again and have a box full of the never use them, type of bits.
Right.
Show,
Right.
show people what those things really are doing to their animals. So
It's worth it. It's for educational purposes.
yeah, yeah. And then I'm weird about sentimental stuff too. Like I got a bunch of different shaps that I have used over the years, and I'll use shaps up. I'll use them up and beat them up, right? I mean, I wear them every day, and this guy's like, "Why don't you get rid of those? You haven't worn them for 10 years." I'm like, "Well, but I wore them a lot back when I did use them. It's like every all my shaps have, I mean, they've got hundreds and hundreds of mules and horses under them. I'm like, but I rode all those in those shaps. She's like, "Who cares? Get rid of it." So, yeah, Sky's the minimalist of the family. So, do you guys got like a rule? Like it seems like, for Sky, if it hasn't been used in a couple months, it's gone. But what's your rule?
Yeah, I think well, I don't know if we have a strict rule like that, but I try to live kind of that way. And what was really enlightening for me was that when we did our first big clean out, there were things that I didn't want to let go of and Noelle didn't want to let go of. So we put it all in like Rubbermaid tubs and storage. And then 6 months later, we said, okay, we're going to go pull all that out and go through it. And I thought, well, I don't need any of this now. But it was at the time initially, it was like, we can't get rid of this. One of the rules that I have, if it's like $10 or less and you could go buy it any time, well, then throw it away. Like if by chance you need another one, just go get another one.
I had all sorts of school supplies like index cards and highlighters and stuff. And I mean, I stored them for the first 5 years of our marriage and never touched them. And it's like, it wasn't a lot of space, but it was a box of stuff. And I'm like, I haven't needed this for 5 years. If I really needed it, I could go buy it. Like we're not that poor yet, but so we can buy a highlighter if we need a highlighter for something. So yeah, stuff like that just takes up space and we're never actually probably gonna need would get gone.
Well, I bet your tack room is pretty clean.
Yeah, we run our business out of a boarding facility, and so we share it with a few other people, but it's pretty clean.
At least your section is probably pretty nice
Yeah,
and tidy.
yeah. Basically, almost everything in there, gets pulled out every day.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, you're using it. Heck yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I remember, when I first moved out, I had a 3-horse trailer, and it had a little, one of those little tack rooms, like a divider wall type tack room in it, right? And I had a snaffle bit, and I had a saddle and one saddle pad. I had a halter, like just one halter and lead rope, my shaps and my spurs. And that was it. That was my training unit. And I said, "Oh, I need a flag. I need a training flag." So I just found a stick and I taped a tore up rain slicker sleeve to it.
Okay.
And that was my training flag, you know. And I had to and I had a few panels, and I leased this 3-acre little piece of ground for $25 a month. That's it. She just enough to cover the taxes on the property is what she charged me. And I remember I had to use the corral panels, the pins for part of my round pen, you know. And so like it was just this most, just the barely hanging in there, right? Just barely hanging
Yeah.
in there. But you know what? Me and this guy talk about those days and how simple it was, and we just had no idea. We had no idea how simple it was. I remember every day I'd load up the mules, head up the canyon, go ride them up the canyon, come back, grab another mule, tie up the other one to the trailer, ride the other one up, and I just had 3 horse trailer, so there's just three at a time, and
Yeah.
it was just the good old days. It was just the good old days.
Yeah.
So
And you got a lot done with that at that point with what you had, right?
yeah, yeah, I sure did. Got a lot done. It was the beginning of our career. It was really cool. It's fun to look back at those things. It really is.
Yeah.
So I want to Sky. So Noel, Sky said that we got to talk about Jewel. Okay, so she loves that mule and she follows it. All your everything you post, and you mentioned about your accomplishments, and I want to get into that a little bit more too. But um, I need to know more about Jewel. Like, did you raise this mule? Did you buy this mule? Like, how did Jewel come about?
So I actually, for those who know Jay Langford, he's a mule man, who he taught me a lot growing up, and I would help him out and ride mules and stuff. And I told him, and he would do a lot of buying and selling. And I told him, I was like, well, and it was right before we got married, and I was really wanting a young mule because I always like a project. And so I had my mule that was good and solid going. That was that Annabelle mule that a lot of people know. I think Sky was even interested in her when I went to sell her, but
And of course,
uh,
she's interested in everything you got to sell, Noel. Okay.
well, so I told Jay, I said, well, I really want a 2 to 3 year old mule that has good conformation and a good mind. And I was like, if they have a little bit of color too, I wouldn't be opposed to that. Well, a week later, he calls me and he's like, well, I'm on my way home with your mule. And I was like shocked. I was like, whoa, like, I hope I like it. Like, if you're all on the way home with it. So I went and met her, and I could tell she had a really good mind. So I bought her off of him. He had gotten her for me. And then he said if I hadn't wanted her, he would have kept her. So if I hadn't asked him at the time to find her for me, I mean, I may not have ended up with her, but it was just
So
really good timing.
so was she? Did you
And
say she was 2? How old was she?
she was like 2.5, yeah.
2.5. Mm.
So I found out later when her actual birthday was. So the person he got her from had got her at a sale here in North Carolina, like as a weanling. And I tried to contact the sale and find out where she was from. The guy could only tell me that she was from a mule breeder in Tennessee. Well, I finally gave up hope. And then one of our friends, Lynn York, who's a mule breeder in Tennessee, I was on her Facebook page and I saw a picture of a baby mule. And I was like, that looks awfully like my mule. And I started looking closely at the pictures and all the markings lined up. And turns out
Mhm.
it was one of hers. And I had always wanted one of hers. And I already had one.
Heck
but
yeah.
but yeah, so she was she's just always been a lot of fun, really easy to work with. And I know Sky likes her because she matches Sky's theme of cupcake and
Oh yeah.
black with the white legs.
Yep. Sky and her dad, they love those socks and they love those good mules. So yep, absolutely. So how old is Jewel now?
She just turned 10.
Right
Wow.
on. Time
So
flies, huh?
yeah. So yeah, the farrier's horses always get last to be trimmed and trainer's horses get the last to be ridden, it seems. But so she's sort of been on the back burner for the past several years. And I've done stuff with her, but it wasn't really till this year that I really like set a goal that I was trying to get her out and show her more and do stuff. And she's met it. She's done a great job. So,
You know, Sky's dad, Larry, he gave me some of the best advice when I first married Sky and, I was training for the public. And back then I was riding Sky and I, between the two of us, we'd have 30 a month. I mean, it was a dark to dark business. Like, I mean, I was seriously, I'm not exaggerating. I would ride 18 hours a day, and don't ever get lights in your barn. That's the mistake. That was the mistake. Having lights, because that kept me up late. But he gave me some advice because, I was kind of doing the same thing. I wasn't riding my own. And at the time, I only had one of my own. I had a mule and Sky had a mule, and everything else was all public stuff, right? And but I just hardly ever rode my own mule. And Larry said, you're a man of integrity, and because of that, you don't have to worry about your clients' mules. You'll get to them. I know you will, but it's important that you ride your own mule first every day. And because you ride your own first, and you still got your public mules, you have to ride those. And you got integrity. You're gonna do it. You're gonna do it no matter what, right?
mhm.
But the opposite is not true. If you rode all the public mules first, by the end of the day, you're tired and you look at your mule and you're like, "Ugh, maybe tomorrow." Next thing you know, it's been weeks. And so I took that advice to heart and I started riding my own. And man, it made such a difference because like on your own, I feel like that's when you get to really experience the true progression of things because all the public stuff, they come and go, they come and go so quick. Like on the stuff you guys are taking, what's the timeline? You guys got minimums like 90 days, 60 days? What are you guys doing?
Yeah. So we do have a 90-day minimum, and I would just say we are really blessed. Like, we tend to attract the right people, and then, of course there's people who come and go like you're talking about, but we have now, quite a few people that are just on the program. So whether they're, animals with us or if it's at home, we're either doing the work or they're doing the work, but it's progressing. And so, we do get animals in to start under saddle and things like that. But like we have one horse that has been there from the start. Like she was either the first or second horse that came into the training barn, and she's been there this whole time. And I get to show her really.
It's that pretty pinto mare that Brandon
Yeah,
shows.
she's an Oldenburg mare, but she's black and white, and it it's just been really nice to have at least that one. That's the one that's like, okay, at least she's here and we can continue to advance her. And then, it breaks up the day where you're not just breaking colts all day.
Oh yeah. Yeah, riding colts all day, that will wear you out.
Yeah.
That is that's a burnout deal. When I was training for the public, I would look over the schedule and see the ratio, the colt starting versus some tune-ups and then others that are kind of like the progressive ones, the real progression animals. Those are always my favorite because you get more done with them. Starting colts, I love starting colts. Colts have always been my passion. They really have. But it was typical, right? You put 3 months on them and they go home and start over again, and you just don't get very far, really. In 3 months, you just can't get far, and
Right.
that kind of got to be a little bit of a burnout. I think that's what probably burned me out from training for the public was the turnover of the colts because you just didn't ever get to see what they became, and oftentimes you do a good job on a colt, and you knew how much potential that 3 or 4 year old had. And you'd do a good job on it, put 3 months on it and send it home. And you'd get a call, 6, 7 months later, the person got on, same old story, got bucked off, right? Well, what happened? How's the last few months been going? You've been riding it? Well, no, I just got on it. Like, come on, man. And it's always the trainer's fault, right?
Right.
It's never the person's fault. That's why we teach extreme ownership in my clinics now.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a burnout point for me was the turnover. So riding some of those for that long period of time, that is really cool. That's really neat. But I feel like that's only available in the show world. Like You can't do that with like trail animals. They want their animal back, you know.
Yeah, so that horse's owner is just fantastic, and we get along so well. I mean, she came honestly to be started, and then
Never
she was
left.
going to go to a show barn, or a honestly a more qualified barn, and then we got along so well, they just haven't left. So it's funny because I always tell people, I think people think I'm really competitive, and if I never went to another horse show again, I would probably be okay. Like, I like being at home, and I win my ribbons on the day-to-day work, you know, and I really enjoyed that part. I'm actually not very competitive. My drive comes from somewhere else, but it's part of it that there are some expectations there. Um, like you say, I think there's just more of that in the show world. We do have a few clients that, maybe their horses come in and then they'll go home, and they'll come in and go home, that they just have a passion for excellence, and they're trying to improve themselves. So, the horse will come for us to ride for a while, but it's really about them. But that is the exception, not the rule, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I had a few of those, like for the trail riding deal. I never trained for the show world. There's really not much of a show world here in Utah for
Mm.
especially for the mules. There's nothing here for the mules at all. But I was just more in the ranching world and the trail riding world. That's where I come from. And so either way, whether you're training them for, you know, working cattle or you're training them for the trail, there's just like there's a limiter on that. But people would take them, they bring them to me and like have me tune them up and then take them home for the bulk of the year, then bring them back. If there was a certain time in the year where they knew they weren't going to be riding. And in Utah,
Right.
typically winter. In Utah, winter was my busiest time, not summer. Summer, when I was training for the public, summer was like famine. Just you could not make it. It was so difficult. My slowest months were in the summer. But come wintertime here in Utah, when the snow's 3 feet deep, yeah, you know, everybody, like, you bet. I mean, I had a full house, pretty much
Wow.
November, I'd say after the hunts, right? After the hunts. So like November until March, I was just rocking it. And, yeah, but that's, it's just, other places I've learned are totally opposite of that. There's other places that, south of me, get down to Arizona country and it's the opposite. People don't want to ride in the summer down there. So they ship them off in the summer and they ride all winter. But,
Yeah.
you said something, Brandon, that I want you to speak on because you made a post the other day and I actually wrote it down because I wanted to ask you about it. And what you just said goes along with it, that you win your ribbons from the day to day. And I love that. But here's the quote you posted on there. You say, don't fall in love with the success, fall in love with the habits that bring success. You remember sharing that?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
That's
So,
awesome. That is so good because man, it's the process that makes a difference. So tell me what your thoughts are on that. Go ahead.
yeah, so I think before I was a professional, well, I guess there was a gap there. So when I was a kid, I rode every day, right? And I was working on my horse every day. I was working on me every day. I was learning everything I could learn every day. And then, I entered the adult world of having a job and responsibilities, and we kind of became weekend warriors for a while. And there just wasn't consistency there. And so for me, what becoming a trainer meant was that I could work on myself every day. And then I've chosen to be more consistent with my own animals now. And so I've really grown a lot in that, just from developing everyday habits, with my horsemanship, mulemanship, where, I think that was just hard now we actually, that's a big part of what we do. Our business is called Balanced Equestrian. And so it's not just, the balance of the physical balance of the animal. We talk about that a lot for sure, especially in dressage type work, but we talk a lot about balancing our time and balancing our finances, when we're working with clients, all that stuff comes up because everybody will tell you, well, they just don't have enough time to ride, right? Or they just don't have enough time to train.
So on that balance, like, so what are you telling your people? Like, so if you had a client come to you and say, hey, because let me tell you, this is something that did bug me, and it still bugs me when somebody wants to, because I get, and I've sent people to you guys. I've sent, if they're from that area, I send people to you for training. But if they say this, then I usually fire back with something else. Okay, if they say, I need to send my mule or my horse, whatever, to a trainer because I don't have the time,
Yeah.
then I usually respond like, well, if you don't have the time now, how are you going to have the time then? Like
Yeah.
you especially like in the colt starting world, you know, if you don't have the time to put into a colt right now, there's no way in 3 months you're going to make the time. Like, you know, so it needs to become a priority, and I tell people you don't have to spend hours a day at it. Just be consistent. And consistency could be 10 minutes. 10 minutes is better than nothing. I'd rather you do 5 minutes a day, 5 days a week than 5 hours one day a week. If I could choose, But so what are you telling the people when they say, I just don't got time to ride, so do it for me.
Yeah. So like I'll one client in particular comes to mind because I feel like she has made a huge change within this last year, and then it's been evident in her scores in the competition arena, and also just in what I see in her horsemanship. But we had that conversation a year ago, and she said, well, we have a business, I'm helping my husband with the business, and then the land that they live on, they live in a house, and then one of their sons lives with them, and then there's a house right beside them where their son, daughter-in-law, and two toddlers live. So she's like, my family's all around me, someone's pulling me in every direction. And and family's a priority, right? Like, I get that. But if you're going to find success with this, like, you've got to work at it at some point. So she had to draw some really big boundaries and say, like, well, I've got this sacred special horse time in the morning. And so she just told everybody, from this time to this time it's horse time, and just don't even ask, And on the day-to-day basis, I think that's kind of how she's living her life right now. And it's worked. And I think we all have to go through that at some point. We have to decide that we're going to prioritize. And I understand seasons of life, you just can't do it, right? And you have to give yourself grace. But once you decide you're prioritizing your horsemanship or mulemanship, then you just have to go for it.
Prioritize, man. That's the word. That's the word. You
Yeah.
got to do it. And my big thing, I tell a lot of people, and it drives people crazy, but I am definitely an advocate for getting up early. Like, get up
Yeah.
early and get after it. I get up at 4:30 every day, and I feel like the only hours of the day that I truly own that are mine are from 4:30 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. After
Yeah.
that, like, it kind of belongs to the world, which is my family, my business, my students, my even maybe even my meals, whatever. Uh, the only time of day that's really mine is those first 3 quiet hours of the morning. And yeah, any day that I sleep in, and I do sleep in on occasion, and I regret it instantly. Is yeah, I hate waking up. Like, if I slept into like 6, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm so behind. Like, I've lost my day, and I find myself just having to rush to get everything done. So I tell my students that too, hey, you got to prioritize some time. Like, um, you know, because I know for the average person after work, as much as they'd like to say that they'll probably ride, after work is risky business, I think, for a lot of
Right.
people because you get home, you got family, got to make dinner, got to do the dishes, got to do the kids' homework, you got to whatever. Where in the morning, hey, you can probably own that morning
Yeah.
as long as it's not -10 like it is here. Then it's
It's
really
funny
hard
you say
the morning.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. For me, I mean, I need rest. Like I know I need rest, and so there's a flow that my body goes in, and there's going to be days that like I need to sleep, and so for us, our typical flow is we kind of sleep in on Sunday, and then we do church, and then typically like right after church we eat lunch, and then we get back in the bed and we take a nap, and I've just learned that if I don't rest, one day a week, then my whole flow is off, and then I'm just not, to me, I'm not as valuable to others if I'm not well rested. So there's a balance there for sure, and you just kind of have to find what that means to you. But I know other people who are, I would argue, more driven than me. Like they can just keep going and going, and I've learned that I really can't. There's a limit. But you said earlier 10 minutes. I also wanted to make a comment. There was a month this year where I really wanted to be consistent with my donkey. His name's Sammy, and I just knew it was just a really busy time. And so I told myself we'll just go out there for 10 minutes. And I was doing stuff on the ground, so it's not like you had to tack him up completely. And I was doing things at Liberty, so it's really easy with the tack. But that was actually so helpful. And I would set an alarm, and it was almost just to prove it to myself, like even with you talk about soak time, even with soak time in between it didn't look like I did a whole lot. He didn't move around a whole lot in that 10 minutes, but at the end of that month we were a lot farther along. So every little bit counts, and again, there's seasons where that's just part of life and you've got to figure it out. But I didn't just completely quit, right? So it was still a priority.
Yeah, just got to do it. Hey, I
Yeah.
like your comment about Sundays. I'm the same way. Sundays, like it's hard for us sometimes when we're on our clinic tour, to actually take a full Sunday off, and it drives
Mm.
me crazy when I can't. And I know there's risk to it, but like I have a fear of like if the truck breaks down, like I need more days, so we're always like in a hurry to get to we hurry up to get to the next clinic stop, and then we're off, right? But the days where you can take a full Sunday, that the so many people get the case of the Mondays, right? They hate Monday so bad. I if I have a good Sunday and I rest and I really actually use the day for rest, and just relax, I'm like ready to go on Monday. I'm just wound up.
Yeah.
Good thing I
Yeah,
don't
I'm
drink
the
coffee
same way.
because I'd be just going.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I Mondays are honestly my favorite
Mhm.
typically. And I always just feel way more excited, when I walk in the barn on those days.
Heck yeah.
And
But
Sunday naps are some of the best sleep I get all week. When we get 2 or 3 hour nap on Sunday, I love it.
yeah, Sunday's my big reading day. I'm not a very good napper. If I take a nap, I wake up really cranky from the nap.
Well,
I just get cranky, but I just relax, and I like to read on Sundays. That's one of my favorite things to do. And so Brandon, you made a comment about setting an alarm for working with Sammy. And I've actually heard quite a few people talk about this. In fact, I just had Christina Bailey on, which I think, so Noel, Christina, she comes to Leatherwood.
mhm.
Um, she says like she'll set an alarm. Speaking of alarm, I gotta turn mine off. Um, she'll set an alarm, if she has some little task to do. And then in the podcast we just recorded, she talked about uh having to dust her house And so she set an alarm, how long is this going to take? And it took her like 5 minutes or whatever to dust her whole house. But that's actually a good idea. Um, Brandon, I might have to tell my students to do that when they say they don't have time. I'll say, all right, okay, can you just give me 5 minutes, like literally 5 minutes with your mule. Set an alarm so you're disciplined, and then you go back to your business, whatever you got to do, whatever. But just go do 5 minutes. And I think people will be surprised what you can actually get done in 5 minutes. I
Yeah.
mean, it's really amazing what you can get done in 5 minutes. I mean, even with soak time, like you're saying, like leave them alone. In fact, which is I think the best time for them to learn. Ask them a question, leave them alone, right? But that's a
Yeah.
good idea. It really is.
Well, and I don't like the pressure. Like, obviously, like I just love to take all day and, hang out, but it's just not always possible. And another thing that I've learned is, um, so I travel a lot around for farrier work and also teaching lessons. I travel to other farms for that. So when I have a full day and I just know hour by hour, like how I'm going to fit the training horses at the training facility in, I just get it all done, right? But if I have the whole day and all I have to do is train the horses at the training facility, it will take me all day, right? So I've learned, like, I enjoy those days because I'm not rushed. And so I'm okay if it takes me all day because I can do it at the pace that I want. But it doesn't mean that it actually takes that long because the other busy days I still get it done. So
Mhm.
there was actually a business podcast that talked about that, making a schedule and kind of sticking to it. And so sometimes if efficiency is the issue, I think timers and things like that really help.
Yeah, I was just thinking back as you're saying that about, I told you at one point, I mean, Sky and I had like 30 head a month in,
Mhm.
and, and I was riding 18 hours, whatever. And I mean, it was so busy. And thank goodness she was there to help me. She rode a pile of them too. But yeah, I could ride 30 in a day back then. And now I ride two.
Yeah.
So like when I'm home, so we're off of our tour. Yeah, when we're on tour, it's different. But when I'm home, and I don't have any obligations, I get my stuff done in the morning or whatever, and then I do have the day to go ride, and yeah, I'll ride two of them all day.
All
I'm
day.
like- and I think, man, how did I ever have time for all those others? I have no idea. It's kind of like the people. I got a buddy that's retired, and he says, "Man, I just don't know how I ever had time to go to work. He's so busy in retirement. I don't know how
Yeah.
I ever fit a job in there, But yeah, I guess when you prioritize and you get after it. The other thing and you guys can both speak on this. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. You know, w- there's objectives every day as you're training. For me, and you guys have heard what I teach and preach a little bit, I'm sure, but we teach a process we call the checklist. So every day we literally start from the beginning. So every day I start at step one, and in the beginning, it takes a long time to get step one, right? It takes a long time to get step one, but eventually it takes seconds. And we just check up that list, and we go until we hit what we call our wall. And that's where things start to get difficult. Now, and I tell my students, I'm very particular, I don't go to failure. I do not want to push my mule to failure to where they actually don't execute the maneuver, whatever I ask of them. I don't go to failure. I go to where things start to get difficult, and then I'll just work my way back down from there. Back down doing things that they know, things that they're confident on. So I always end on the mule or the donkey or the horse doing something that they actually know. We just work up to a difficulty level, and that's kind of how I ran my training program. That's how I tell my students to do things, and it's been really really beneficial for me. But what's your idea on something like that? How do you guys work out like one of your daily sessions with one of your animals?
You want to talk on that?
Well, one thing I like to do, like especially when we have young animals that are coming to be started under saddle or whatever, I like to go out and do like a 10-minute, 15-minute session, find a good stopping point where they understand what I'm doing, and then I'll either tie them up or turn them back out and move on to the next one. And then a lot of times I'll go back and get them and do something again later, and just sort of like what y'all were talking about setting a timer. It's like almost doing those like 10-15 minute sessions, and they just learn. They can learn so much in that. But when you keep pushing beyond that, it's like then they just like hit that wall and they're like, nope, I can't do it anymore. And then it just like all goes downhill. So I think just being able to realize where they're almost at the breaking point, but not quite there. And they're willing to keep learning, but you sort of stop it before they're just too tired of doing it.
Yeah, I actually got to listen to the podcast that you did with Candace Schauger today, and I loved hearing what she was talking about with the donkeys, and I agree with it so much because one thing that the donkeys have taught me is that it's very mental, right? Like I feel like I could just go in the arena and like you know stand there and tell them, hey, I need this step and do this. It's like methodical, and once they understand, there doesn't have to be a lot of running around there. Sometimes you look out in the arena and it looks like someone's real busy and the animal's moving a lot and they're moving a lot. It looks like a whole lot of work. But then at the end of it, like to me, if you ask the horse or the mule, like, what did you learn? They didn't really learn anything. They were just kind of getting pushed around, right? And so to me, I think sometimes if it's the learning process you're after, it either doesn't take that long or they can only take so much and then you need to back off. So the donkeys have changed the way that I do the mules and the horses too, for sure.
Man, donkeys, I tell people, hey, you know what? Work with the donkeys and you will be excellent with horses and mules.
Yeah.
So one of my favorite quotes is from Tom Dorrance. Tom Dorrance says, "You have to treat the mule the way you should treat the horse." Okay.
Yeah.
But if you take it to the next level back with the donkey, you're good to go. Like you really have to be particular with that. And the blood and dust stuff doesn't work with the donkeys. The sweat and blood and dust, I mean, you just can't, that's not it. You can't get away with it. They'll shut down so fast. And you're right. You learn to work with those donkeys, and everything else, you're like, I'm good to go. It's such a
Yeah.
piece of cake. It really is. But I love what you're saying, about asking them a question, thinking about it. Um, you know, uh, by the time this podcast airs, we'll have another episode that will have been out from I did a review on the book called Sacred Spaces with Dr. Susan Fay. So that's coming out.
Wow.
Um, People listening to this right now, they've already heard it. But anyways, we recorded these podcasts ahead of time, right? But so we had a conversation about, asking the horse questions, right? Asking questions. It's not about just making them do it. It's asking them to do it, you know. And I if you Noel, you've watched me do clinics a time or two, at Leatherwood, and I don't know if you've ever seen this exercise, but it's one of my favorite. And I'm talking about it so much on the podcast these days that people are going to get the hint and understand faster, which is good because I want them to understand faster. But in our foundation class, I usually do this. I'll hold my fist up and I'll say, "Okay, who thinks they can get my hand opened?" And I'll ask for a volunteer, and I'll say, "Okay, try to open my hand. Whatever you got to do, get this thing open." And they'll start prying on my hand. They're pulling it apart, and I'm just holding tight. And sometimes they start pinching me and hurting me. Like, okay, knock it off. That's not it, right? They make me man up, but and I'll go around and the first person doesn't really get it. The second person tries harder, like puts more physical effort into it. And it seems the physical effort has to go from participant to participant higher and higher. like they're putting more effort into it until they really are like pinching and pulling and kicking me or something like that. Until finally somebody realizes, oh, just ask them, you know, it, will you open your fist? Yeah. And I'll just open it up. All I had to do was ask me. But that's my exercise with them. And you use that in your lessons, you guys. But
Yeah.
just ask, and I feel like so many people feel like they have to tell the mule or the donkey or the horse, they have to tell them to do something. They have to make them do something. And hey, ask them. Ask them. And you can ask on two different levels. You can ask on I like to ask on the mental level. I'll tell my students, okay, what's the first signal, the first cue you should give your animal? And usually they say, oh, well, seat, they're thinking ride and seat, or if they're on the ground, they're thinking about, a leading rein or something like that, right? And I say, no, you're close, but what's the first cue? And the first cue should be a mental cue. I'm thinking and I'm asking that animal, hey, will you, you're a farrier, Brandon, will you pick up your foot? Can you pick
Yeah.
up your foot? And I'm thinking about how I'd want that foot to be picked up. I'm picturing it, and then I would go to the physical, maybe making, you put your hand down, right? Some of these horses learn, you put your hand down, they'll pick it up. Some you tap, on the fetlock, whatever, right? And but so many people just go right to the physical too quick, and they don't even think about asking them. So great
Right.
comment. Got to ask.
Yeah, and it's a lot of work. I've told people, you know, um, both with picking up feet like you're talking about and with just riding. My goodness, if I had to ride 10 horses like yours, I my whole body would be killing me because your horse is so heavy. They have to be light so that I can ride multiple animals a day, and so it's a good thing that they're willing. We need them to be willing so that it's not so much work for us, right?
Oh man, especially with you doing your farrier work.
Yeah.
Sky made a comment today too. She's like, oh, he makes those feet look so pretty. So whenever you're posting pictures of the feet you're working on, so yeah, she's a fan of yours, man. Uh,
Well,
so how does that tie in with your training business? Are you doing farrier work all over the place, or is this mostly for your training clients, or is it all the above?
so I guess I should preface it with I should have never been a farrier, and that was never the plan.
He
So
said he would never be a farrier, and
everything I say I don't want to do, I think God just comes in and goes, well, guess what you're going to do next? So, um, you know, I'm addicted to learning, and so it even before I was training, it was like I wanted to understand what the farrier was doing and how they were making decisions and how it, helped, the biomechanics of the horse or made the biomechanics of the horse worse, right? So I had a good farrier that, shared knowledge with me. And since then I've been able to work with, several farriers, and now there's just so much information out there. So, I just take in as much as I can. But it started as, well, I don't want to be at an event and my horse throw a shoe and, me be not able to play anymore. Like I want to be able to tack a shoe back on. And then it thought, well, the farrier we were using, even when we started training in the very beginning, I still had another farrier that I was using, and he didn't really want to deal with the young stuff because they'd pull on you and they weren't great with their feet. So I thought, well, okay, well, I'll trim those. And then it's just grown more and more. And part of it's, certainly the economics that, you can make money a whole lot quicker with that. But then part of it is, really you can help a lot of animals. And, we get calls from other farriers that, they run across a mule or a donkey and don't get along with it. And then, they want Noelle to come out there and play with it. And so, you know, uh, it's grown. I think now we calculated I probably trim most of what I do is barefoot trim. So I think I have like 200 head that I trim per cycle. And then, probably 5 of those are in like glue-on shoes because I do some glue-on shoe work.
So
That's
to
a
answer
lot.
your original question,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
not all like less than people. Some of them just,
Yeah.
they're only our clients because they're trim clients.
Nice. Well, it's good that you offer that. I think there's a lot of trainers that are realizing the value of kind of being the all around provider, and you do have to have a basic knowledge. It's like out here, where I'm from, out here in this big ranch country, when you get hired on to a lot of these ranches, they want you to know so many things. For that $1,500 a month job, they want they want you to be able to shoe a horse and fix a tractor and know how to bale hay and fix fence and all the things. But it's good to know that stuff. It really is, and especially with the mules and the donkeys. The differences there. I don't know how many podcasts you've listened to of mine, but we've had Nathan Heyer on. Nathan, he's kind of famous out here in Arizona and Utah country, in the mule world for his work he does on mules. Because it's hard to find people that will work with mules just because of the stigma of mules, right? They
Yeah.
just they're not even going to give them a chance. They just hear mule and there's such a bias, they're not even going to show up for a mule. But even if they do, so many of them show up and they just chop the heel right off. You spend all this time trying to build a heel on a mule and it's gone. Just like that. It goes bye-bye, and oh man, that's the most common thing we see. What kind of stuff you guys seeing out there in North Carolina with feet? Like what's going on with the hoofs out in that country? Thrush?
Yeah. Yeah. I was about to say, so, you know, since what we do, I do a lot of barefoot stuff. It's all about, we really want strong, healthy, functional feet, right? And you can always put a shoe on a strong, healthy, functional foot, but you can't always have a horse go barefoot without it. So we get a lot of thrush, with the donkeys, lots of white line disease and things like that. But it I think what hopefully people are learning more and more about is that it directly affects, the movement of the animal. And so, as the trainer, it just kept hitting me that it was like, well, I can't do what I need to do because the feet aren't where they need to be, and like I can't imagine now like going, well, my horse really needs to be trimmed, but the farrier doesn't come for 2 more weeks. And I couldn't imagine like waiting 2 more weeks. So I think just doing it myself is helpful, but you know, I guess we just see a lot of, dysfunction in the hooves, and then we're just trying to create more functional feet. And if that may just be trimming, or it may be, choosing the right kind of shoe, or even just movement. If they stand in a stall everything but an hour a day, that they probably don't have great feet, right? Just because they're not moving and using them.
Oh yeah, they got to get out and move. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I see that there's so many things when, like in my career, when somebody asks me about a problem they're having, there's like, okay, well, which rabbit hole shall we go down? Like,
Yeah.
how is their feet? How's their health? How's their teeth? How's their back? We can go through I mean, we could just go down all the physical, each part has its own rabbit hole, right? And then get into the mental stuff and then get into the training process. There's just like so many things that could cause, when somebody asks me, hey, my meal doesn't stop very good. It's like, okay, great. Where do we start? Like,
Right.
because maybe it's not stopping for so many different various reasons, that, I mean, it's not just that they don't know how to stop. And, everybody wants the quick fix. Like, well, what bit should I use so they stop better? I'm like, no, 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 no.
Yeah.
It's not about that. It's not about that, and in fact, some of the stupid things that people will put on make them stop even worse because they brace and whatever. See rabbit hole I'm talking about here, but
Yeah.
but yeah, even the feet. If they're a little off, if they're just a little bit sore, or if they're a little unbalanced, your stop could go to nothing, just quick,
Yeah.
and you're thinking, oh, Jesus, this dang mule won't stop. Well, hold on a second. Hold on a second. Maybe they went to stop, but because of that little sore, the little lameness, the little whatever you want to call it, shoot, it made them do a little hop skip, and then now they're walking off on you. You know.
Yeah.
So what are some examples of things that you're seeing like that? Like, can you give an example of a behavior that people maybe complain about that might be caused via the hoofs? Like, can you think of anything? I know I put you on the spot on that one.
Yeah. No, well, I don't know. There's lots of things. I think what really hit me the more I learn about how they should move, if they're not compensating. Now I see compensation so much more. So if they're not using their full stride length and they're not either landing heel first or even flat, if they're just plowing their little toes into the ground, that's just not great, right? For so many reasons. And so, that causes, I guess, lamenesses and tension in the body. So like what we do with the Western dressage, it's really important that they're elastic and supple and movable, right? And then you take that animal and go, actually, well, your feet don't feel great, so you're compensating. Well, then their whole body's tense, right? And then then you call the body worker, and then they loosen them up, but then it goes right back because the feet aren't feeling good. So that's probably a big part of it. But then there's been times where, I remember someone telling me, oh, well, my horse doesn't like going on trail rides. And then I'm like, well, that's really rocky where you're trail riding. So, you probably need to offer some sort of protection there, right? And they had no idea, that their horse was refusing to go, but it was more of a hoof issue.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Thinking about the strides and all that, I mean, I get a question a lot in the clinics. How can I get my mule to walk out better? I want a faster walk. And I'm just thinking to myself, uh, as you're talking here, like I've seen so many people that the feet are not right. Either they're like way long, or they're short, or they're sore, or something's up, they're out of balance in some fashion, and they just want me to tell them to plug their mule harder. Like,
right,
where should I
right.
kick them? Like, no, no.
Yeah.
So all these things are related. It's fun. Like when I talk to, when I talk to somebody that works with feet, there's that rabbit hole we can go down, and that involves so much. And when I talk to equine dentists, it's all about the teeth, and there's that whole thing. I mean, but the truth is if you're going to really get along with these guys, you kind of have to be well-rounded and well-versed in all these things, just animal husbandry, knowing these things. And it might seem somebody listening to this might be a little overwhelmed, thinking like, well, man, I got to know all this stuff. Well, no, you learn a little at a time. You learn as you go.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, most people learn when things go bad. Hopefully people are being a little bit preemptive these days, but usually when trouble comes your way, you learn. But there's so much involved in all of it. It's like that saying, ignorance is bliss. I just remember back when I didn't know anything. I just knew nothing, nothing at all. I still feel like I know nothing, but I really knew nothing back then for sure. And it's just life was just easy,
Yeah.
right?
And there's been plenty of times where, either we will like video a horse moving, and see how their body's moving before and after either a trim or something like that, or even you have the vet come out and x-ray the hooves after you've been working on them, and you think you're sitting there patting yourself on the back, oh, I'm I've got it covered, and then you look at an x-ray or look at a video, and actually you created a whole nother problem. So but there's no book or no video that's gonna get you there. Like, you've got to go out and do the work and experience it and get a feel for it, right? So it just comes over time.
So with your farrier work, did you go to one of these schools to learn that, or did you ride along with a local, or how'd you get in that business?
Yeah, so I rode along with a couple of guys for a while, and then honestly, when 2020 hit, there was just like all this influx of information, like all these people who had been traveling the country teaching for years, all of a sudden were stuck at home and they had all this time. So I just felt like the internet like exploded. And
Yeah.
so there, at that point, um, I went on a vertical learning curve pretty quick. Like if I already wasn't on one, then it happened then.
Oh yeah, that's when we put our video library out, and that's when this podcast started. Because that
Really?
same thing, I
Yeah.
was sitting at home, right, and all the clinics got canceled. So that year, out of 30 clinics, 14 canceled. So almost half. It's like
Wow.
I got a lot of time on my hands now, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, so yeah, I get it. I mean, I started putting information on the web where I never would have thought about it before. And yeah, I know a lot of other people did too. And the technology, for better or the worse, whatever, it's pretty dang cool for information. I mean, it's right at your fingertips. You can learn so many
Yeah.
things, and that's pretty fun. It's pretty fun. So, Noel, do you ever get under them? Do you ever work on a feed, or you just leave that to Brandon?
Woo.
No, I about get tired just cleaning a foot out alone. I've gotten better. I'm good about treating them for thrush and stuff because everything's got it pretty much here. So we try to keep up treating with the training animals, and I think it helps even if just doing it 3 days a week, making sure it's good and cleaned out and treated. I think it helps a lot. But
Well, so like one thing we see a lot um, is the thrush, and then if you put like an open heel shoe on them, or even if the heel gets too long, like I think sometimes the mules their heels get too long, and then the heels and the frog that's not functioning correctly. Well, then it'll like atrophy, right? Then the heels contract, and so you know that really happened with Jewel specifically. We were talking about Jewel, and here we had this like really good mule, but then you look down and it's like, well, her feet
frogs were
are,
falling apart.
yeah, and like everything's contracted, and you just think, well, these are really weak feet. And I remember, well, I kind of said, well, we need to treat her for thrush, and so it was like, when you thought about it, you kind of do that. But the more Noelle has done with her riding wise, then it becomes a bigger priority that the feet have to be right. So now, I mean, probably at least 3 days a week, like she cleans the feet out really good and she treats them and she does all this stuff. And it's funny, over the last couple of years, we've really seen her feet like totally change. I'll tell you who have like the best feet is like people who do endurance, like Nancy, that that does endurance. I've seen her mule's feet and they're just like gorgeous.
Oh
All
yeah.
the
Well, I
extra
mean,
moving.
they're made to move, right? I mean,
Yeah.
these feet are made to move. They're made to go. And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, the worst thing for them is sitting in those stalls or sitting in those pens. They're just not, those feet aren't made for that.
Right. Right.
And it's tougher in your part of the world. It's tougher too because of the moisture.
Mhm.
I see a huge difference in feet in the West versus the East or the coastal areas. Where there's so much moisture. Their
Yeah.
feet aren't made from that much moisture. It's
Yeah.
tough. Fighting that. So what are you doing for treating thrush? How do you doctor that up?
So if it's really deep, I like to pack. We have a clay product that we use called Artemud. It's more of an all natural product, but it packs in those crevices really well. If they have like deep central sulcus thrush, it'll pack in there. Uh,
And it stays for several days too. Like if you
yeah,
go to clean the foot out 2 or 3 days later, a lot of times you'll still smell it
yeah.
in there. So
It smells good. It has like tea tree oil or something in it, so you can like smell it when you take that out. And then there's other liquids stuff that we'll put in there. Either Durasol is really good for white line disease, or
Vetericyn
yeah,
head
there's
care.
a Vetericyn product now that seems to work really well too
I
in our
think
area.
all the products there are all probably about the same because people are like, oh, what products is gonna heal my thrush, like is gonna cure the thrush. I think the biggest thing that needs to be done is it needs to be done consistently.
Yeah.
So like I don't think it really matters what product you use. I think it's about doing it at least 3 times a week and not stopping. And so that would be when I first was doing it with Jewel, like I would do it and I was soaking her feet in like a half vinegar, half water mixture. So I would soak her feet for an hour, like 3 times a week, and I'd do so good for like 3 or 4 weeks, and they'd be starting to look really good. And then we'd go out of town and I'd like stop, and then like we'd come back and I'd be busy and I'd like totally lose my cycle and they'd fall apart again. And so like I think like
Yeah.
to me the soaking was a very helpful thing. It's that one's just a harder time to find the time to clean and soak, and that not all animals want to stand with 4 bags on their feet. So
Yeah. Yeah. Again, being consistent, right? I mean, in all these things, it's interesting about feet. Like a good buddy of mine, he'll turn his horses out here and he may not ride them for 3 or 4 months, get them in, and their feet are, I mean, a little long. He's got to usually trim them up, but they look so good just being turned out, on all that country. And I was thinking about that when you mentioned Nancy and the endurance riders and stuff, and they look so much better. When I leave, I got a pretty big paddock here, and I got, there's got like 50 acres here, and but even that, you know, I'll, I get so stressed when I'm on the road because I'm thinking about how long their feet are getting. And I'm thinking like, oh man, gosh, I got, and I do all my own, I don't hire anybody. It's hard to find somebody for one where I'm at. I'm in a pretty kind of rural out here area and there's not a lot of farriers. Um, but yeah, man, like this fall, I was gone 8 weeks. I'm like, oh man, I know when I go home, we got some work to do, and it was actually surprising. I got home and a couple of them actually didn't. They look really good. I was like, wow, you guys either must have been walking around in here a lot or something. But and then I got a mare. My mare, of course, her feet look terrible. I'm like, oh geez, so bad. But yeah, that's tough when you're gone. It's tough when you're not consistent for sure. So if I can I got a gal that does all my chores for me, but I don't think she's gonna get after it. And I don't think she's gonna be too fond of me wanting to train her to trim my mules up for me.
Well, I keep pushing Noelle, and she says she doesn't do anything, but every now and then I'll look over there and there's a rasp in her hand and she's filing something off, so it's
Yep,
coming.
that's good skill. I tell you what, so I'm a big fan of physical fitness and being in good shape and exercise and all that. And, I preach for people to work out every day, whatever, but I don't care how much I work out. When I get under a mule and I trim some feet, man, I feel it. Like, I'm like, I know I don't do this for a living because I am so beat. And there's a joke, people ask me, how many of your meals and how many do you do in a day? I say one. They're like, one meal? I'm like, no, 1 foot.
Yeah.
Oh man, you just walk around bent over for a while because you can't get up. I tell you what, that uses some different muscles, doesn't it?
Right. Yeah.
Of course, you're used to
Yeah.
it.
It's funny, people ask me a lot, they're like, your back must be killing you. And I think everything I did, leading up to this, it was with riding, it was all about light. So it's actually like my hands and my forearms, I've always had this light feel. And then, now we do some, chores and construction type things. And then with the trimming, like to be able to pick up a tool and like put some force behind it, I had to develop that. And I've had, wrist trouble and, really tight forearms and things like that. That's way worse than like my back.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So when you got to go pound a nail in somewhere, it's,
Yeah.
Noel's like, "Come on, man. Put your back into it.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, I get, maybe that's why, maybe that's why I get sore. Maybe I'm just putting too much effort into it. I'm trying too hard and I need to be lighter.
Yeah, I do. Well, yeah, I think you do have to develop some strength, like because it's not as soft as riding, but once you get good with the tools, I think it's easier just physically because you know how to use the tools, right? In the very beginning, I mean, I remember like you're talking about, I'd do 1 or 2 feet on, my personal animal, and that was all I had in me, but it was because I did work too hard because I just didn't understand the tools. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I sweat just like you're talking about every day.
In the degree weather, he'd be dripping.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
But I think it would be really helpful if a lot more people would learn how to trim up their own, even like just in between trims, because our training horses, I mean, they get ridden about every day and they still get like they wear their feet down a lot on their own, but like Brandon will go and trim everyone up every 2 to 3 weeks, just like sort of rounding them out, making sure they're going the correct direction. And I think that's really helpful too for healthy feet to sort of keep them going the right direction every few weeks. When you're not doing it every 6 to 8 weeks, which I think is a lot of people's schedule, like that's a lot of time for stuff to go wrong. And the farrier can't really fix it when they're only coming every 8 weeks. And I think that's the biggest problem Brandon runs across with like the people who just have pasture ornaments that get done every 8 weeks. Like it's not going to be pretty. You got to do what you got to do, and it's not going to get fixed. But
Yeah, that's I mentioned Nathan Heyer and he gave me that advice. He's like, "Hey man, trim every 2 or 3 weeks and just do a little bit. For one, it'll keep the hoof in better shape, but also you're not going to get, when you got to get under one, that's been grown out for 2 months, 3 months, whatever. So, some a long time, you get under one like that and it's work to shape that thing up but every few weeks, he's like, man, you don't even need to use your nippers. Just use your rasp every couple weeks. You'll be good to go. And so I've tried to do that until I go on tour. And then only the ones that are on tour with me keep the good feet, and everything at home has to wait, a month or two till I get back. But
Yeah.
that's just the way life is here. So what are some things you wish people would do to do a little bit better job at preparing those feet, preparing those mules and horses to be trimmed? Because I know that's just a constant thing. And I I think there's a little stigma or I guess, like with mules, since so many of them are barefoot, especially the mules, right? So many of them are barefoot that a lot of people don't clean out their feet very often. Therefore, they don't handle those feet very often. So, I mean, sometimes they don't get handled until you show up, probably.
Yeah. So, I think when I started doing this, I realized I didn't have near enough respect for my farrier and the job they did. And so even if you're standing there holding the animal and they look calm, they may be pulling on the farrier. So,
Yeah.
right, they could look fine, in their face, but their shoulder or whatever, tense and pulling. So, I when I go to pick a foot up, we were talking a little bit about that earlier. You know, it's one of my pet peeves when they lean into you and put like all the weight on the foot that you're trying to pick up. And most of the animals that I work on are really pretty good, or they become pretty good just because I think, they realize I'm kind of there working with them. I'm trying to keep them comfortable and I'm not trying to put them in positions that are uncomfortable, especially you think about donkeys. I mean, and I guess mules too, but they just have horrible reputations with farriers. So I think when you work with them, they get better just because they realize you care about how they're feeling in that moment. But then you're right, owners often don't go there. So for instance, if I tell owners, hey, you've got really bad thrush, they look at me like, oh, like I'm gonna have to pick the feet up, and treat that. So part of it's picking it up, but then part of it's just honestly teaching them to balance, right? So much of it, I think when they pull on you, it's they're not thinking about keeping their feet still, or they're not thinking about their own balance. So practicing just that, my donkey, he's a bit clumsy. And so with him, like I just do it regularly, just spend time with him picking one foot up just so he has to think about the other three. So
Mhm.
yeah. And anytime, it's funny, Noelle gets called because a farrier will call her and go, "Hey, I'm sending you someone. This mule tried to kick my teeth out." So I need help. Um, and it'll either be, she goes out there and they do a lot of rope with or work with ropes and leading by the foot and stuff like that. And I always think that's a great idea for owners, but there's so much feel to that. And so people, I think they just value the riding so much more than developing a feel for picking feet up, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We had
Oh.
one mule in training that I tried so hard, like its back feet. I mean, it would kick and it would double barrel kick, and I was trying to work with a rope and get it to tighten up. I mean, I worked with this thing a month, and I was like, Brandon, I cannot get this mule to let me anywhere near its back feet. Like, I'm not gonna ride it if I can't get near its back feet. Because what happens if I fall off and I'm near its back feet? It's gonna kill me. And so he started doing some positive reinforcement stuff with it, and that turned the tables for this mule. And so I mean, the rope work has always worked with everything else I've done, but I mean, not everything's the same. Some you have to change. And he'd look at its foot and it look at him and he'd give it a treat. And I'm like, okay, well, whatever works for you.
Well, and I don't think it was the rope work necessarily that was wrong for him. This mule that she's talking about had this like huge fight response. And so if he felt pressure before he took the time to figure out what you were trying to get out of him, he was just like rolling his sleeves up, ready to fight. And so he wasn't really scared of much, but he would just I guess it just felt like he had a lot of donkey in him, right? He was just gonna fight. So I had to step way far away from that, like, okay, hang on, like I wanted to make it more clear that what I was wanting from him. And then the positive reinforcement worked because it was so much less pressure, right, for him. And then, I think it just worked. The system of earning a reward worked more than adding pressure, which I think Noelle was at the time just adding more pressure when he was bad, right?
Yeah. Well, I think like I uh, usually with my students, I'm trying to get them to stop feeding treats because they've gone too
Yeah.
far, usually too far, and now they are the treat dispenser, right? And
Yeah.
but something I have noticed is when people are using that type of training, I like the mindset because they are looking for things to reward.
Yeah.
So I do appreciate that aspect of it. It gets the person looking for opportunities to tell their mule good job. Whereas when that's not involved, I feel like um, a lot of people will miss opportunities to say good job. I think that the very best reward we can give the animal is to leave them alone. I think that's just leave them alone. That soak time, I call it soak time. Some people call it dwell time, whatever you want to call it. I think that's the ultimate. But I think a lot of people miss those opportunities. So
Yeah.
when you give them something like that, like a treat to say, hey, when this is working out for you, give it a treat. Okay. Then their mindset is on rewarding. And I think that's really great. Now, like I said, so many people cross that line so far.
It's
It's
yeah.
another one of those things you need balance in, right?
Yeah. So yeah, we're always pushing balance, right? But you're 100% right. Like I know people who they they don't want to use any pressure, or they go, oh, I'm going to go only positive reinforcement. And I don't, by the way, I don't even think it's possible, right? Like how do you not have some sort of pressure on them? But what I've learned is that, like you're talking about, that if you can, you know, get them to answer yes questions, if you can get it to a point that they understand what you're asking for, and then you're rewarding that. Um, Obviously, with release of pressure or a food reward, like they're happy to do it, right? The problem we run into is that people's timing is so off, that they don't get those moments. And so um unfortunately, the people that I meet that are really good at positive reinforcement are not good at the other stuff that you're teaching. And so it's really tough because they really need both, right? They really need both ends of it.
Yeah. Well,
But
that's just life, there's you gotta have, you know, you gotta have the hot to know the cold and the cold to know the hot. And I mean,
sure.
it's just kind of how this world works. But yeah, I like how you guys call your company balanced equine. I mean, that's so good. Balanced equestrian rather, excuse me.
Yeah.
And that's good.
So I'll tell you one story. So like that mule that Noel was talking about, he came out in the arena one day, and again, he was the kind of guy that, like, if something went wrong in the session and you were trying to correct him, he would just get really hard to handle. And so I walked out into the arena that day, and he decided that one of the corners was terrifying. And so who knows, like, what he saw or what he smelled or heard, but he decided that he wasn't going over there. And like I wasn't going to be able to get him to go over there. And I just thought, I could like lead him back in the barn and just come back out here tomorrow because like this isn't going to go well. But let me try something. And so he had learned like to touch a cone and target a cone. So I went over and took his little magic cone and set it in that corner and pointed at it and told him to touch it. And he trotted over there, touched it with his nose, and I gave him a treat. And then he decided it wasn't scary anymore. And then I did my whole ride and never gave him another treat.
Mhm.
But just that shift in mindset, whatever brain chemicals that came on when he realized, what we were doing, it shifted his mindset. And I don't think I could have done it that day another way, or at least that easily.
Yeah. We got to get them saying yes.
Right.
Ask them
Some,
yes questions, and set that up in a way that they can make that choice. And it's no different than us. I mean, really, trying to you just got to get yourself in a positive mindset, and then you're good to go. But when you're in a negative mindset, it's really hard to see the good. It's hard to see the
yeah.
yeses. So same thing with them. Just get them saying yes. Ask yes questions. So I like that.
Yeah.
Well, I see Miss Noel yawning there. You getting tired?
Yeah.
I know it's much later there on the East Coast than it is out here. So we better wrap this thing up. But I ask all my guests at the end of the show a question. So I want both of you to answer this individually. Um, but I ask you to give advice to people going down this road of life. It doesn't have to be mule or horse advice related. It can be anything. But what would you give? What kind of advice would you give to somebody going through this thing called life? Noelle, you want to go first? Ladies first?
Well, I will say, Brandon's been trying to study up on your podcast to listen to your conversation. So I asked him, I said, well, what is there any questions he's going to ask? And he's like, well, he asks everyone what advice. And so I was going to steal his advice, but I won't do that. I think for me, just trying to be consistent, like we've talked about, whether that's like horses or non-horses, but like if you have a goal, I mean, even if it's as simple as like, hey, I want to be able to lead my mule. Like, I think breaking it up and being like, hey, I'm going to go out 3 times a week for 5 to 10 minutes and just groom on my mule. And I may not even halter him, but I may just go out there and groom on him and take some deep breaths. And I think just having that, like, as we've said throughout the conversation a few times, like just taking that 10 minutes a few times a week and just breathing and relaxing and finding the time to settle with your animal consistently, that sort of is the basis of wherever you want to go with them.
Man,
But
I like that so much. That's so good, Noel. And because I've talked to my students about being mindful when you're spending time. There's kind of old jokes about this, and it's kind of funny in a sense or not. But people say, "I'll just go out there and just read a book with them." And I'm glad the person's at least getting out there. Good for them. But that's not intentional enough. Like you will be, I call it the barn cat syndrome. You become the barn cat when you do that. When you're just there, then you're just familiar. But I liked how you said you go out there and just groom on them and focus on breathing. That kind of stuff, that's intentional. That's mindful. Like you really have to focus on that, and you're really wanting to be with the animal when you're doing that, and you're paying attention versus just being the familiar thing out there. So that's great advice. Awesome, Noel. Thank you.
I will add onto that. It is very, very difficult to take 10 deep breaths without getting distracted, especially for women. I don't know how it is for men, but we have so much going on in our heads. Like that takes, like you talked about, you just said intentional. Like you have to be very intentional to take 10 deep breaths, I will say.
And so maybe I have ADD, but that's something that I've tried to train myself to do and make it a practice, is that if I can take 10 deep breaths and I count them, then if I can do that, then I can like go to the next thing. So I might get on a horse and like in my warm up while I'm moving around, I may start counting. And what typically will happen is I'll get to like number 3, and then I'll think of something else. And then I'll, remember, oh, I was supposed to be breathing and counting, and then I'll breathe and count again. I might make it to 5, and it may take me the whole ride, to like get to my 10. But what I've found is that when you change your breath and you center your mind and focus your mind on what you're doing, the animal changes, right? And so you can feel their breath change, you can feel them relax. And so sometimes we get so focused on what we're doing, or even maybe something fearful happens and then you don't realize you're just not breathing. And I feel like trainers tell their students all the time, oh, you need to breathe, but for me, the counting to 10 is really helpful.
Yeah, I that's always annoyed me. You need to breathe, breathe. It's like,
Yeah, yeah,
well, how? What are you
yeah.
talking about? You know, uh, Dr. Susan Fay, she's the one that wrote Sacred Spaces. I mentioned her earlier, but she has a really cool course on just that, learning how to breathe.
Yeah.
And she kind of goes over that. But yeah, it takes focus, and there's different types of methods of breathing, and we don't need to go into that here on the podcast, necessarily, but like 4-7-8, in for
Yeah.
4, hold for 7, out for 8. And
Yeah.
I didn't realize how bad I was at holding my breath. like, like
Yeah.
you can't breathe.
What if for 5, 6, 7?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm ventilating all the time. But yeah, I mean, that's important. It really is. And that kind of what comes to mind too is, so one of my mentors is Martin Black, and he tells a story about somebody that he learned from a little bit. And I can't remember the guy's name. I wish I could, so I could say it here on the show. But he talked about this guy working cattle. So with soak time, that's what I'm getting around to, is the time that it takes you to breathe like that is giving your horse or your mule that time to soak and dwell and do their own thing, right? And that's where the learning happens. And so he talked about this guy, he'd go work a cow, he'd cut one out and do a couple turns on it. And then he'd stop and he'd let his horse soak, and I'm not advocating this, okay, but he would smoke 2 cigarettes. You know, so he would let his horse stand there the time it took to smoke a couple of cigarettes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, not 1, 2, right? So, yeah, don't start smoking, people. But the point is given that, taking that time, I think that's very important. So that's great. Brandon, what's your advice for these people going through life, my friend?
Yeah. So I always tell people to seek balance and harmony. And that sounds kind of fluffy. So, but it really is kind of what I live by with this stuff. Balance is everywhere, and balance within nutrition and balance within the feet and the saddle fit and the movement and all that stuff. But then just mental balance and emotional balance, all of it is so important. And, balancing your time, all that. So, and then harmony, the moment you feel things kind of where you lose harmony with your animal is where you need to be figuring out how to get back there. With dressage, there's a lot of, especially at the low levels, there's a lot of ugly dressage, and there's a lot of disharmony. But then when you see true harmony out there, I mean, it's beautiful. And so again, like for me, if you're doing it well, there's harmony. The moment that you feel that you're losing that, something's going on, and you've got to make a shift somehow.
I like that. Those are good words. Balance and harmony. One of my favorite books is Think Harmony with Horses by Ray Hunt. It's a great book. It's a great book. Have you guys read that?
I haven't. I have read the Sacred Spaces book though. You're talking
Good.
about. Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta get you a copy of that Think Harmony with Horses by Ray Hunt. It's a good one. It's
Yeah.
really good. So, well, I appreciate you guys so much for doing this with me. This has been dang good. It's good to get to know you two a little bit more and chat with you a little bit. And we could have done a whole podcast on both of your advice about taking that time and then also balance and harmony. We could have done two different shows on those things. I mean, those are
Yeah.
big topics. So maybe we'll have to do this again.
Sounds good.
But
Do it.
well, I'm going to say thanks to all of our sponsors that make these podcasts free for all of our listeners. We got Western Mule Magazine, along with Mules and More Magazine. Also got Colt Saddlery, Roman Home Tents, Diamond W, and also our friends at Boyd Ranch Mule Days. So big thanks to all those people that make this podcast free for our listeners. Thanks again, Brandon and Noelle. I appreciate you guys. And everybody out there, God bless you, and we'll see you down the road.